Hello, my love. We meet again.
Yes, hello.
We're here today to talk about the Fool card, which is the first card in the deck of the Major Arcana.
Hmm.
Okay. And we set the stage a little bit with the intro video that we did. So if you haven't watched that, folks, please go watch that first. But I think it's worth a very, very brief mention here, a revisit, a high-level summary of that introduction, which is essentially answering the question, why are we going to study this? Why are we going to engage with this material? And to me, the answer is, as we look at this card, as we put the Fool card up and you look at it, perhaps keeping in mind these questions. What is this telling me about the universe? What is this telling me about God? What is this telling me about myself? Because ultimately, I think that is the original intention of these cards. It's to have used color and shapes and symbols and images to communicate to us the truth about God, universe, and self subconsciously. Communication through symbolism, which is the language of the unconscious mind, that is meant to evoke within us and sort of reconnect us to the truth about these things, the capital T truth. Okay.
What do you mean by capital T truth?
Well, I suppose that what I mean by capital T truth is truth that is true in all places and all times and at every level always. So absolute truth as opposed to relative truth. So an example of that, the difference would be, a relative truth would be if I said, my name is Noah, I am a man. That is a relative truth. It's relative to the realm of being in the experience of a human being and in a body, or having a body, having the experience of being embodied. And I can say that, I can say, my name is Noah, I am a man, and the vast majority of people on the planet are not going to have a problem with that, right? That's going to ring as true. They're going to see my beard growing in and all of that and recognize and hear my voice and say, yes, man. And if he says his name is Noah, I believe him. So that's relative truth. But if I expand the scope of my sense of self and move beyond the realm of human experience in consciousness, or simply in as an experiment in my imagination, I can say something else about myself. I can say I am consciousness. I can say I am eternal. I can say I am beyond all forms. I've had enough direct experience of my greater self, capital S self, such that if I look at the small human form and identify just as the human, then that no longer seems true. If I say I am Noah, I am a man, that seems quite limiting and small based on my actual experience, not on some hypothetical. So at that larger level of capital T truth, really the truth is just I am. That would be the absolute truth. That's the capital T truth. I am.
Okay, in your experience.
In my direct experience, and then depending on your inclination, if you're interested in sort of seeing where else that shows up, it's all over the place in Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity. It's the name of God in Judaism. Yahweh is I am. So there are plenty of hints. If you don't have that direct experience, there are plenty of hints in spiritual teaching and in esoteric religion that point to the truth of that, if you don't have that direct experience. So there's other ways of connecting with that reality, or attempting to connect with it if you haven't experienced that for yourself. Reading the Bible and trying to understand what it was that Jesus was saying would be one example of that.
Yes, and it's interesting to note that across many cultures, religions and things that were forming simultaneously, that there's this similar theme, this
Mhm,
idea of wholeness.
mhm.
So essentially, there's a religious consensus on this.
Yes, there is a, at least in terms of the mystical understanding within each religion.
Mm,
Yes. If you just talk with sort of the casual religious expert in various religions, you might not get that same sense that you're getting.
mhm.
But yes, certainly the great teachers and mystics of every religion all say the same thing. Yeah.
So, so what I think what I heard you say was one of the benefits of studying these cards as a group or as an individual is to explore themes and patterns and images and colors that are part of the collective experience. So it's sort of pointing you in the direction of this oneness or wholeness. It's shared amongst humans.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, is that these cards are depictions of the truth about us at a personal level, so to speak, in the sense that when each individual looks at these cards and studies them, they will have a deeper sense of this kind of quote unquote personal who I am, and my understanding of the universe. Except the secret is that when each individual person does that and goes deeper, deeper, deeper to find that truth of their personal self, what they're actually connecting to is the one universal truth amongst all
Mm,
self, capital S.
mm.
And so yes, it's a way of connecting us to this shared truth of who we are.
And so each of us, all humans, here's a postulation here. All humans are going through the experiences that are depicted in the cards, regardless of whether or not they are conscious of going through those experiences. So the tarot tableau and all the cards are sort of like a map
Mhm,
of our human experience. And some people are going to be aware that they're in a tower card situation, for
mhm,
example, and some people are not going to be aware and are going to be oblivious to the symbolism of the what is happening to them in their or with them in their life. Okay.
right.
So can I ask you, like, why do you like to study the tarot?
Um, I like it because, as I have mentioned previously, it's for me, it's something that takes me out of my intellect, even though there's a strong intellectual component if you're interested in that. Like there's so much detail, all of the symbolism, uh, the nuance around the Hebrew language and the numerology associated with it. You could spend a lifetime studying this stuff, and people have. And so there is a strong intellectual component, except for me, the symbolism is a way of breaking through that purely intellectual level, and communicating something directly to the subconscious through picture. And for me, it's similar to why I love Jungian psychology, depth psychology, and dream analysis. Again, as I mentioned previously, is it's the same idea that it's it's using the language of the unconscious mind, which is symbol. The
Mm-hmm.
unconscious mind speaks symbolically, um, to help connect us to a deeper sense of ourselves. Um, and and
Okay.
and and to me, I just find it to be what it's intended to be, which is a universal tool. I think there are very few tools that have this kind of universality to them, combined with um, being in a package that is not just speaking universal truth, but is in many ways universally appealing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So hypothetically speaking, let's just say that the Bible contains the exact same universal truths that are being depicted here in symbolic form. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
great. Except that everybody who picks up a Bible already has preconceptions about the Bible and its characters and what it means.
Mhm.
and or there's hierarchical authorities telling you what that means and what the truth is. And there's fear, and there's a lot of history associated with it, thousands of years of not so pretty history associated with the Bible, to say nothing of the fact that a massive percentage of the world does not identify as Christian. And if you hand them a Bible and say this is the truth, they think you're trying to convert them, again, because that's what's happened for thousands of years.
Mhm.
And so it's a non-starter for a great number of people to pick up a Bible which may contain all of the same universal truth as in the Tarot, and actually see it with fresh eyes and allow it to teach you something new about yourself,
Mhm.
because they've already been told this is what it means.
Right. So, we have the opportunity to see it differently every time that we look at it. And it's more open for interpretation because it is pictures instead of words on a
Mm-hmm.
page.
Mm-hmm.
I want to share a little bit of why I am returning to the tarot again. A lot of people who watch our podcasts or know us personally know that the tarot was my first real experience of learning about Christianity, and it was taught within a Christian framework.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about 7 years ago now. And at the time, I was super vulnerable emotionally. And I really took the teachings as they were given to me as rules. I took all of that very at face value. So, I have played with this over the years with you, but I think this time, as we go through this class, I'm really going to be more critical and thoughtful about what I have been told that these cards mean,
Okay.
and be open to new interpretations, and just see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great.
So I'm looking for a fresh start with the tarot,
Great.
which is a perfect
So
segue.
indeed it is. Speaking of fresh starts, voila, here's the
Yes.
picture of the Fool. Okay.
Yes.
So this is a picture of beginnings. And we can say actually the term fresh start in many ways does apply.
Mhm.
And so since you just grabbed that theme, let's just start with that. What about this card is communicating to us fresh starts? Well, the character here, the central character in the card here, the Fool, is carrying this long wand or scepter with this little bag, this little satchel attached to it. And the teaching of this symbolism is that this satchel, with the eye and the eagle on it, is the container in which all of the past experience has been kind of collected and contained, and is there, ready to be accessed if needed, if and when it's useful. But it isn't the defining feature of this card. What the defining feature of this card is this Fool figure perched on this ledge, getting ready to step off of this mountaintop, the heights of the mountain, to step off of that lofty perch that is removed from the earth, removed from experience, and step off of that down, and fall, so to speak, down into the realm of duality and of experience. In other words, to have a fresh start.
Mhm.
For me, going back to what you were talking about with respect to seeing this stuff for the first time and how we perceived of it, I still, when I first studied this, was really still attached to this idea of the soul journey,
Mhm.
the personal soul journey. And for those of you listening, if your ears just perked up and you went, well, where's he going with this? What do you mean? I'm not, I don't want to put that concept down, so to speak. It's no longer really how I perceive of things. If that this idea of a personal soul journey, multiple lives, reincarnation, and you being a soul that is sort of comes down into a body, is born, lives a life, leaves the body, goes back into the ether, heaven, whatever, and spends some time, and then maybe is reincarnate. That's fine. I think that's a perfectly useful way of painting a picture of what is happening in consciousness. That's fine. Okay. But I was really attached to that as being quite literal. And so that's how I saw this. And my reason for bringing that up is that's a perfectly acceptable way to understand or conceive of this card, that this is a picture of the soul self, or the higher self for people who like that term, which also has some problems, but that's neither here nor there. This higher aspect of ourself, our soul, being distant from the earth and distant from human experience, stepping off this cliff, and it is spirit descending, falling into matter, spirit coalescing, and a soul becoming an embodied human being born into earth and living experience, i.e. beginning, a fresh start. Okay.
Fresh start.
Yeah. And so in using that lens to view this, we would look at this satchel and say, oh, this is past life experience, for example.
Okay.
Or karma, just past experience, things that have happened before, that we have carried with us, and are bringing with us into our new beginning, our next round of experience.
Well, I think it's actually kind of funny to call it a fresh start if you're carrying a bag of like old memories with you. Like, it just never occurred to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in this case, notice it's a very, it's not baggage. He doesn't have, 50-liter Louis Vuitton bags and need several bellhops to cart this stuff over the cliff. He's
Right.
traveling light. I said I shouldn't say he. It's
It's a they,
my internal bias. This is a they or an
a
it.
non-binary
This is
figure.
yes, this is the divine non-binary.
Yeah.
Boy, we could launch into a whole cool conversation about that. We'll again probably save that for another time. But it's an essential part of the understanding of this card. This is not a gendered being. This is an androgynous being. Because
so this is all of us.
This is all of us. That's right. Yeah, a better way, instead of thinking about this as the personal soul, if you think about this as the oversoul, you're making a face. I need to go into more detail.
Like, what does that mean? Oversoul?
The
like
concept
overlord?
Yeah, kind of. The concept of oversoul would be the collective soul of humanity. So instead of my separate individual self sort of leaving a body, coming back down, etc., if we think about it more collectively, the soul of humanity descending and becoming humanity. I had a point with that. I don't remember what we were talking about.
I said this is all of us.
This is all of us. Yes.
And then you said yes. Not if you think of the higher self as instead of an individual higher self, but as the
thank you.
collection
right.
of.
So this being all of us, right? Then well, it can't be a gender.
Right.
It's non-gendered. Again, we'll spoil a great theological and spiritual secret right here very early on. God is not a man. So this higher soul or spirit level or super consciousness, we can talk about what that means. This highest expression of consciousness isn't a bearded fellow. It's an androgynous being. Okay. And in another way of understanding this is that this zero, this precedes anything, right? So if we're counting things, we would say this is one thing here. We would use the number one, and this is a thing. Well, prior to the number 1, 0, we have no thing. So this precedes any specificity of thing, and gendering is a thing, right? Man and woman are things that you can point to and count. This precedes that. This comes before duality,
before creation.
before creation. Yes, this is pre-creation.
No thing has happened yet.
That's right.
Right.
So
Okay.
just to revisit something that you said, because I think it is a great point. So this being is traveling lightly with this baggage that it's carrying. It's really about collected experience, and not necessarily, this bag isn't full of trauma per se. Right. Okay.
It's a very interesting thought to actually think about this bag, because in the system that we were educated in when we learned this, everyone in this group believes in reincarnation and past lives, and it was kind of taken for granted as truth with a capital T. But I think part of the unmaking of the religiosity of my experience has been to question that truth. And did I come here with prior wisdom and prior experience? Who was I? Who am I? On and on and on. But clearly this card is a collective. It's trying to capture a collective knowing. And so I think where I personally have come to terms with, have I lived before or haven't I lived before, is just by tuning into the knowing that has no words. And also the science of, that we've discovered that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It exists. And so when I combine this, my inner knowing and this scientific truth, whether it's with a capital T or small t, I don't know, that energy is neither created or destroyed, that brings me into the ability to kind of resonate with the bag and feel like, okay, I can see that as valid.
Yeah. So let's go with this question about energy. I would suggest that this idea that energy is neither created nor destroyed is a capital T truth, which means it's also a relative T truth. So in science, right, when you take something and light it on fire, light a piece of paper on fire, the paper goes away, but you haven't destroyed anything. You've just simply changed its form. And boy, that's immediately directly connected to this, because the intelligence of this card is called the fiery intelligence. So there's something about this card that is associated with the element of fire and its transformative capacity.
And the word scintillating, I had to look this up because I'm like, what the hell does that mean?
Bright, sparkly.
Well, yes, that's the collective understanding, is lively, vivacious. It has a kind of a sexual connotation, I think. But the root of the word is from Latin scintillare or something like that, and that means spark. Yes, so I think it's actually a very appropriate word, even though I thought it was a weird word.
Yeah. Yes, again, why do we study this? This is a great example. Is I find that every time I go through this, I go, oh, holy shit. Yeah. Look at this little piece of the puzzle that I'd never even realized before. And sure enough, it fits perfectly. Yeah. So fire just transforms paper into a different form. It goes from the form of paper and it becomes heat, energy, and ash, essentially, right? So no energy is lost or gained, right? Okay, why is that important that you hit on that? Because one of the other themes of this card is this concept called the cosmic egg. And if you look at the the number 0, it looks like an egg.
The bottom
Okay.
left of the card.
Bottom left of the card. Or just picture an egg in your head or
Mhm.
picture a 0, right? It's shaped like an egg. And this idea of the cosmic egg is a symbol that is trying to capture this paradox of nothing, 0, or no thing, and yet at the same time, everything is present.
Mhm.
So if you literally just think about a chicken egg, and you're thinking in terms of chickens, you would look at that egg and say, there is no chicken here.
Right.
That's not a chicken. It's an egg. That's not the same thing as a chicken. Right? There's no feathers, there's no beak, there's no meat. It's an egg. And so we would say there is no thing, there is no chicken there, and yet everything necessary for a chicken to be is present there in that moment.
Mhm.
Right? There is a list of statements from that's associated with Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. And I don't know how much detail we'll go into, but it's worth mentioning because the 0 statement, it's numbered 0 through 10. And the 0 statement that's associated with the first Sapphira on the Tree of Life, which is the crown, Keter, and is associated with also directly the 0 card here, the Fool. That statement says that all the power that ever was or will be is here now.
Mhm.
So there's just a fancier, more spiritual and mystical way of saying the scientific truth. So the scientific small t truth is energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Yeah.
The fancier capital T truth way of saying that is all the power that ever was or will be is here now. Just like in the egg, everything that can ever be necessary to become a chicken and that will become a chicken is present right there, then and now, even though technically there is no chicken there.
Mhm. In the analogy that we talked about last time, this is like the woman who says, or the man, woman, man, who says, I think we'd like to have a child. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, because the Fool is that top level on the tableau, which is the realm of
Mhm.
archetypes, which is
Mhm.
the realm of pure ideas. All that exists here is ideas. So again, it's a 0. It precedes any actual thing. It precedes any actual experience. This is prior to experience. And so there is no experience of separateness or life here, but there is this idea, and that's actually conveyed if you look at the Fool's gaze,
Mhm.
which is sort of up and off into the distant in this sort of daydreamy fashion.
Yeah, they
It's
look like they're contemplating what's coming.
That's right. Yes, that you can see it in the depiction of the Fool's face, that the Fool has this sense of going somewhere, but it's just an idea. Nothing has actually happened yet.
Mhm.
And that is absolutely being conveyed here in this card. But just
Yeah.
like
And if
just like the egg, and the statement, all the power that ever was or will be is here now. You combine that with this idea of fire and its transformative capacity, whatever happens next, so to speak, in the timeline, when the Fool steps off this cliff, there is no loss of energy. There is only movement. There is only transformation of energy. In other words, consciousness doesn't actually diminish. That's impossible. There's just some sort of transformation that takes place
Mhm.
with this movement.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to point out is I'm a person who reads emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I look at the Fool's face, they have a very neutral face. It's kind of thoughtful, maybe musing, but it's not a frown and it's not a smile.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
I do agree. Yes.
And yet the overall tone of the card to me feels cheerful.
Hmm.
And maybe that's because of my own associations of color, the way that the dog looks happy, like the dog looks happy. It's looks
Yep.
playful. I find that interesting that there's the disparity between the fool who is, you know, I don't know, flat face, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and everything about the color and the symbolism and the like the health of the rose and the
Mm.
fact that the sun is shining brightly all conjures up a cheerful feeling.
I love that. That's, again, as we've said, every time we go through this, there's something new, no matter how many times I go through this. That's something that's never occurred to me. I've never heard anybody else say that. And yet, sure enough, it fits the theme perfectly, because you've just captured this paradox of the emotion associated with, or to say the experience is kind of difficult because this is beyond the realm of experience, but we have to use words. So let's just say the experience of being in unity, or the experience of unity, is, again, sort of by definition, it's a no thing, i.e. no emotion,
Mm-hmm.
right? To say happy would be to go to a +1. To say sad would mean a -1. But
Mm-hmm.
you're counting. There's numerical or valuation associated with emotionality. And so on the face of the fool, there is no emotion, because this precedes all emotion. This is
Mm-hmm.
beyond the realm of emotion. And yet somehow, at the same time, the experience of being beyond all emotion is ultimately one of serenity, or beauty, or peace, or just, let's call it just positive, something
Right.
positive, right? And that's not going to compute to the human mind, except, again, it's being shown to us here, it's being depicted symbolically in the tarot, and you're picking up on that energy. And you will also hear every great teacher of every major mystical tradition and of non-duality, for example, describe that experience of being in perfect stillness, beyond all emotion and beyond all thought, as somehow being an experience of intense joy, or peace,
Mm-hmm.
or beauty. And you're not going to be able to make that make sense, which is also perfect for this card, because this card is the card of nonsense. That's why it's called the Fool. That's even the name of the card is attempting to capture that paradox, and that tension, um, of sense and nonsense. And this figure here in this card isn't a figure of aged wisdom and experience. There's a separate card for that's later on in the deck. This is a card of foolish innocence, of nonsense,
Mm-hmm.
and the beauty associated with that, and the fact that, even though here we are looking at the pictures and the images and trying to have a conversation about it, really it's futile.
Mm-hmm.
And to attempt to make sense of this with the intellect it's a nonsense experience. It's beyond nonsense, in that it's beyond the realm of senses. It's beyond the realm of emotion and understanding. So even that aspect is being captured here.
The word fool um, evolved from the Latin phallus, which means empty-headed person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, cosmic egg, empty, nothing is here.
Yep.
All of that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. The realm of no thought.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. We could say that this fool is existing in the realm of nirvana, right? Or heaven, if you prefer. Um,
It also makes me wonder if the intention of the artist of this card, the one who created this, who made, an effort to depict a being or non-being with
Mhm.
a straight face, with a soft mouth that's neither smiling nor frowning, with a background that um, makes one feel peaceful or joyful, or gives the sense of optimism. I wonder if there was an intention to use this as a teaching about fresh starts in a literal sense, like in a very grounded, like having the attitude of observing, like being aware of the beauty around you, and also having a neutral out or inner attitude about new beginnings.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder if there was a psychological teaching in this too.
I mean, to me, the answer is obviously yes. Um, I, I, I think that is absolutely a part of the intention. Um, Maybe I'm projecting, but uh, I do think that not just at the level of the artist, but just generally speaking, the hermetic axiom, as above, so below, right? That if what we're talking about here is true in this spiritual sense, that it's also true psychologically.
Mm.
And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because um, as people engage with this material, I think there's something to be said about a practical, grounded, psychological sort of framework of understanding this, and that this isn't just supposed to be, sort of vague and mystical and difficult to touch and grasp. It will be that way, but it can also be very practical in terms of what it's conveying psychologically speaking, right?
Mhm.
So this is the transcendent fool. So as we've talked about many times, the the reality of the sort of pre-trans fallacy, right? This is the transcendent fool, a a lesser developed, or sort of lower, to put it hierarchically, a lower developed fool would be somebody who, say, doesn't look both ways before crossing the street,
Mm.
right? Like if you took this posture and just sort of stared up into the sky with your face kind of blissed out and just began walking across the street, that isn't being the transcendent fool. That's being foolish in the negative connotation. That's a pre-developed uh type of foolishness. And at some point, that person has to learn to not be foolish and
Mhm.
come into the middle place of the pre-trans spectrum and go, oh, I shouldn't be so foolish. I should look both ways before crossing the street, right?
Mhm.
And that will continue to remain true. You and I both look both ways before crossing the street. We put on our blinkers when we're driving,
Sometimes.
most of the time, ideally, hopefully, right? And that practical um, that practical ability to not be a fool in the world and function as a human being remains. And yet we can then return to a transcendent experience of this fool, the transcendent fool, which is that even as you and I are writing checks to pay bills, thinking about what food we need to cook so that we don't starve to death, checking both ways before crossing the street, tying our shoes so that we don't trip on the ice, doing all of these things, there's this inner psychological experience of moving through the world with this kind of forward-looking expectancy of beauty and the whole grand adventure of being human, right?
Mhm.
And doing that with um, a certain faith, and that's also depicted here in the card. This step off the cliff that the fool is prepared to take. We could call that the leap of faith, and it's not coming from a place of hopefulness, like, gosh, I hope that when I step off this cliff I don't die. it's a deeper faith based on inner knowing, experience of true self, experience of the nature of reality, of creation, etc., that we just sort of move forward in the world with this inner faith and knowing that each step we take, we are this fool just taking a step into this realm of experience, and that everything that we need, just like the egg, is there with us. All the power that we would ever need, all the resources that we would ever need, is there with us. That it is eternal, that we are eternal, and that the worst thing that can happen is that energy gets transformed and we move into some new type of experience.
Mm-hmm. So when you look at this card, it's a card that, if you don't look at the edge of the cliff, is quite nice. It looks like a man to me. Looks like a non-binary individual out on a stroll with his little snacks or whatever, and they have this playful little dog with them. That all looks nice, but then if you imagine yourself in the body, although there's no body of this, symbol, but imagine yourself literally on the edge of a cliff, and you have a dog that's like hopefully barking at you and telling you like, don't step off. It's a very different feeling. So what I'm noticing in this moment, as I think about, this, having a direct experience of this, there's always a dualistic for a feeling for me. There's always a physiological sense of doom, like I'm stepping off a cliff. That's horrifying. And the sunny background, the feeling, the sense of, and maybe this is because of my privileged, white people upbringing that I've had, partially. But there's this sense of, even though I'm doing this thing that is new and I'm stepping out into the unknown, I have this sunny background. I really do have this sense of like, okay, I'm doing a scary thing, and I think I'll be okay. Can you tell me a little bit about, the traditional interpretation of the little white dog? Because when I look at this, is the dog warning the fool? Is he barking? Is he playing? Like, what is the dog doing?
The dog is really just being attentive. So the dog's eyes are on the fool's eyes are on the distance. So the energy of the fool is one of, let's see what comes next. And as you're describing the human experience of that, there's a biochemical and neurophysiologic sort of response in the body that depending on our perspective can either feel like fear or excitement. And it's entirely perspective based, right? When you ride a roller coaster and get that feeling in your stomach, you scream with joy. Well, you don't.
I do not.
Any person who's choosing to ride a roller coaster typically does. There's a scream of exhilaration and joy because the story in the mind is pure. It's white, like the dog. There's a purified story of I'm good, I'm safe, this is okay. I have faith that I can take this step and drop and just enjoy the ride, right? When the mind, and so the dog is the intellect or the ego mind, and when that mind isn't purified, when the dog isn't trained, or if it had been colored like covered in mud, or it's been rolling around in its own excrement, right? It's messy and not trained. That's a mind that can't have the experience of the roller coaster in the world. Every experience of the unknown is more like standing on the precipice of a mountain with no rope and no parachute. And the experience of that, even though the sensation in the body is identical to riding the roller coaster, the stories in the mind and the psychological experience of it is polar opposite, right? And it's one of fear. And so the traditional teaching here is that as we the fool, move out of, and putting that in quotes, as we move out of the realm of pure idea and spirit and come into the realm of experience, the realm of matter, the role of being a human being, we bring with us our intellect, which is the dog, and also the rose, which is our passions. And in this case, both of these are white because they're purified, which just means that they are in their sort of optimized, cleanest expression, and are being put to good and appropriate use. So this card shows us that the intellect is a part of the experience of consciousness. This separate ego mind, the thinking mind, is a part of that experience, and put to good use, it's a companion. It adds to the experience. It's something that we enjoy. It's a friend. It's a companion. Yes, it can warn us. It can create warnings, etc. But it isn't leading us. It's very well trained. Notice that there's no leash, and yet it's sort of in this healing posture. It's right here next to his heel, her heel, its heel. Oh, the gender bias. It's a girl. And so this person's intellect is responding to the direction and nature of the being. It isn't telling the being where to go. It's not dictating the action, etc. It's not in charge.
You know what's interesting? When I look at this dog, I guess it looks obedient, but it also looks independent to me.
Well, they're
they're together, but they're not in a hierarchy. Like there's no leash that the fool is like tethering the intellect.
Sure, because the idea would be that the intellect has been thoroughly trained, right?
Or it is completely wild and in its natural state.
Okay. Except, this is a great point, except that dogs don't originally exist in nature. Dogs are by definition not wild. If this was intended to communicate wildness, it would be, as we'll see later in the tarot, it would be either like a wolf or a jackal. Those are wild dogs. This is clearly
like a terrier or something.
Yeah, it's a domesticated dog, which means that it is the product of raw wildness and human intent or will. And so it owes its existence to the molding of spirit, so to speak. So it's by its nature, it is sort of tamed, if that makes sense.
I have an inherent discomfort with the words trained and purified.
Because they sound religious.
They are religious and culty words to me.
Yeah. Great.
So
that's
I like personally the Wi-Fi got weird. I like personally to imagine that although this dog is a domesticated dog or whatever, that it is so trusted. There's such mutual trust between the fool and the dog that there is no need for tethers or commands or whatever. It's an innate relationship.
I love that. I think that's great. Yeah, I'm not just agreeing or acquiescing. I think that is a better way of putting it. Yeah.
It's a way that makes me feel less angry.
Yeah. Again, it is difficult to talk about. And I did almost say, and so I'll say now that when we talk about purification, yeah, it's got this, well, puritanical sort of vibe to it. We'll continue to strive to maybe find better and alternative language, but whenever I use that word, I my intent is not to convey that it's hierarchical, or that the unpurified aspects are somehow bad,
Mm,
right? They're
mhm.
just there's no judgment in this card, that's for sure. Right. So let's look at the rose, for example. I lost my photo. So this rose is white and not red, and the classical teaching is that it would be because that's purified. To me, what that means is that the passion and desire associated with the fool here in this card is always pointed at and oriented towards capital T truth, the truth of higher self, without any confusion or or illusion or misunderstanding folded in there.
Mm.
As opposed to later on, we'll see red roses, which again, they're not bad. We'll talk about that. The first one shows up in the next card. It isn't that red roses are bad. They contain, actually, the red is that fire energy. They contain all of the energy necessary to propel, to move us. But when it's in its red, more raw form, or when the dog is still a wolf, it's just that we're more likely to experience what we would call negative repercussions
Mm.
when we are activated by those more unrefined passion. Maybe instead of purified, we say refined, distilled.
I want to use the word for the white as unmanifest. So the whiteness of the rose and the whiteness of the dog are blank. It's like a blank slate because this card is pointing to the nothing is manifest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get on board
So
with that.
that's another way to think about it, I think.
It'll lead us to a paradox, which is useful because the white rose shows up later on in manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not to dispute your point, because in many ways we could say that the whole depiction of this card and the point and what it's showing us is taking this archetypal realm and everything that is true about spirit and bringing it into manifestation.
Mm.
Right. So it's making the unmanifest manifest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But
And nothing can exist with, I mean, it's interesting that the robe, like the cloak and stuff, has colors because of course the intellect is not going to have a color in the cosmic egg experience of the intellect because it has not had any influences.
right, that's again, I would communicate that is the intellect in its pure state, in the same way that pure water doesn't have any color to it, and as soon as you start adding, some sand or grit, or a salt packet, a flavored salt packet.
Pure, pure is probably a better word than purified.
Yeah.
Um, just for context, most religions and especially I don't know, what do you want to call it? New age spirituality is talking about purification and purifying your thoughts and purifying your heart and purifying your consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
which is literally impossible in form.
Hmm. Mm.
We are in form with if you do not reject form. And that's what happens to people as they're trying to purify their thoughts and purify their egos and purify their hearts, is they're
Yeah,
distancing themselves from the reality of earthiness, the earthiness
um
of self.
yes, this whole card is pointing to paradox. No thing, all thing. Can't wrap your mind around it. I think that what you're saying is true. I just don't think it's the only truth. I think there's just as much potential risk to communicating that.
What is the risk?
Well, I think the risk is that people take that to be quite literal. I have another perspective that is equally as true, that there absolutely is a purification that can take place in the body and in the mind.
So I think my argument is there a finished product of purification? That's the beef I have with this.
Sure.
Is that people in New Age spirituality and Christianity are always striving for the finished product. They want to be the fool with the little dog while in a body.
Right.
Which you, of course, from a metaphysical perspective, you are the fool. You're the whole tableau. But they want that to be the sole experience that they have.
Yeah, there's a faking of the way through it for sure. I know that you'll agree with this. Purification is not a process of progressive rejection. Right? So when we're talking about purifying, it's not about rejecting everything that we find distasteful. That can never be done. That, to your point, that's not possible, nor is it productive or useful, and is in fact quite detrimental. But if we skip all the way to the end, card 22, the world and everything that it represents, it is intending to capture the idea that there's something about this whole process of 0 through the whole tableau to 21 that is possible in the realm of human experience, that somehow captures the paradox of being perfect, pure spirit in human experience. And that is, most commonly depicted in the West as the story of Jesus Christ, and the teaching that he was both fully human, which would be to say all of the dirt and grit and all of that, but also fully divine, all at the same time. And so it is all of that purity of this fool and the archetypal realm of pure spirit and pure idea that is existing in human form without having been diminished at all.
Yes, we'll see how I feel about this when we get to the world card. Because right now it's uncomfortable for me to imagine a positive way to teach that there is a way to be perfectly pure as a finished product.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, without rejecting the fact that your body's still detoxing.
There, there's again, as soon as you say without, I think then we've lost the idea, because now we're not holding the paradox in tension. Right. So what did you say that your concern is that there's a way of being perfectly pure? Oh, as a finished product without what?
Without rejecting the reality that our being, our energy, this fool resides in a form that can never be, there's never an end product of purification. The body purifies all the time. It is pure.
Yes, but right, but there's a transcendent thing sort of beyond that is where that process is itself understood to be perfect and pure. The process of purification is a part of the purity, so to speak, and that's thoroughly understood. But to come back to your point, because I know you and I could just spin ourselves in circles around this all day. It isn't about finished product. It is well understood and taught in tarot that this Fool card, the Fool is forever perched on this edge. This is a depiction of our natural eternal state. We talk about it to try to make sense of it in linearity and say, okay, this is where we began, and then next we step off into manifestation and blah blah blah. But the reality is that this is always who and what we are, and it does not change. and yet we have an experience of it changing somehow. That's, again, it's part of the nonsense of this. We can't wrap our head around it. But for everyone listening, rest assured, Jamie's point is accurate and consistent with the teaching here, which is that this state of being perpetually sort of on the edge of the unknown, with the eyes sort of gazing up forever into new experience, is a part of this teaching. A part of that is depicted here, the position of the sun. This is the eternal sun. This is the first Sephiroth, the crown, the Big Bang, the emanation of all activity. And there's a reason it's over here in the corner and not right overhead, because to be overhead would be to depict a finished product. When the sun is at its zenith, we say, that's it. That's as good as it gets. It does not get any higher. And in fact, the implication would be that if the sun was at its peak, that any further movement would actually bring the sun down. There would be a loss, some sort of loss or descent, a dissipation of consciousness, which is impossible. And so that's why in this card, the sun is depicted as being perpetually at a 45-degree angle, always rising forever. Mm-hmm. Right? Which is the energy that you're wanting to capture, I think.
Well, yeah, my soapbox is about how religion and spirituality are experienced, and just wanting to help people understand, the thing they say about you are already pure, you're already good. That's what this card is revealing. We are the fool at all times.
Yes.
And also we are every other card in the tableau, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Right.
At all times.
Yes. And even though we're this at all times, the card is also depicting that it is okay to strive. It is okay to have your eyes set on the horizon with a sense of what is there that's more, what's next, where is the next opportunity for growth. I guess coming back to when you said, well, what is the risk? I suppose as I look from the other direction, in the opposite risk that I would want to express here and communicate is I don't want people to get the idea that they can't change, or that they're forever stuck in their experience of depression or misery or self-loathing or whatever. To me, those things absolutely can be purified, to use
the word I hate right now.
To use the word that's triggering that you hate. I even agree that's probably not the best word, but nonetheless, I mean, my experience of that has changed. Would you not say the same is true for you? That your thought processes and where they go and how you associate with them and all of that is not different somehow for you?
The only beef I have with this is the difference between evolving and purified, period. That's it. The idea that I agree that we evolve. I agree that there can be a devolving, although for a long time I fought that tooth and nail. The idea that we could regress in some way was very painful for me to perceive and agree with. So I think we're always evolving in some way. And that there is no completion. And that is the I mean, if Jesus had lived longer, like, he would continue to evolve. Like, I now reject the idea that there is a purified state that we are trying to attain. Maybe we're purifying, maybe we're evolving, maybe things are just changing, whatever you want to call it. There is no end. Because it's the snake eating its own tail. Like, where's the beginning of that?
Yeah, I agree. And ... ellipsis.
And
which, it's not going to get resolved. We're basically looking at the same problem from two different angles. We do this all the time. We know to expect it. We don't take it personally. It's a part of the process. And I think it's a necessary, I think it's helpful, because to your point, there is no one thing that's trying to be communicated here. And if we ever look at this and go, I've got it figured out, I know exactly what this represents and I know what it's trying to communicate, then we're missing more than we're getting.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. So we will have many more opportunities to discuss this particular nuance of evolution, process, purification, because it's all in here. It's all in the next 21 cards. Every one of these themes is discussed and talked about. So just to kind of wrap up here, as you look at this card, consider the following themes, some of which we've discussed, some of which we haven't. The cosmic egg, the idea of absolute unity, or the absolute, the idea of the supreme self, leap of faith, the ideas or themes of innocence and youth and foolishness. I think another great phrase that captures that teaching is the phrase that we use, from the mouth of babes, right? In which an expression which is used to communicate how a babbling child with no real intellect just will sort of spout things off that have this energy of pure wisdom to them. And it's just clean and it cuts right to the point, and you go, wow, like this child has no idea what it's saying. It's just sort of babbling from its own unconscious, and yet somehow out of that purity and innocence comes this perfectly apt and poignant wisdom, right? The idea of who and what we are being androgynous, beyond gender,
beyond duality, really.
Beyond duality, yes, beyond all duality. And this idea that we have just touched on, that this impossible to grasp idea that this sun, this spiritual sun, so to speak, in this image, is always rising. That even as we discuss the so-called progression of this fool through the next 21 cards, that the fool has never really left this perch and is always in this exact position, eyes up on the horizon, in the distance, while also somehow simultaneously not moving, but right on that precipice. And let that just sort of kind of work on your mind for a bit, and see what comes up, see what questions you have, and bring them to our live chat if you're going to join us, or email us, join the forum, ask questions, and we'll chat about this as much as we need to.
And if you want an activity, you could spend some time looking at this card and thinking about what's coming for you and what you would like to have come for you, and in which directions you would like to take a step forward. It's your very typical, like, beginning of the new year exercise that a lot of people do, but with a little bit of a twist, thinking about the symbolism in this card, and what you have in your bag that you're bringing with you.
Wonderful. Thank you, love.
You're welcome. Till next time.
Okay. Bye, everybody.